Welcome back to the Root to Bloom podcast, where we explore the fertile ground where creativity, culture, and social impact meet. My name is Ray Phillips, the co-founder of Root to Bloom and your podcast host. And today we are joined by the great Senda Ben Jebara, who is here to unpack some of the current sociopolitical challenges facing grassroots movements and share how movement leaders are responding to some of these challenges. And first, how can we be a good ally to these movement leaders and grantee partners in the philanthropic landscape? Senda is an accomplished leader in philanthropy, a leader in feminist and queer movements, and someone who we can really learn a lot from. So I'm so excited that Senda's here, that Senda is a part of our collective. Senda, we're just so grateful to have you with us today.
Thanks, Ray. It's my pleasure to be here. And yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
We're so excited too. Okay, let's start. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background so far, some of your interests?
Yeah, so I am a queer feminist, activist, movement builder. I've been part of the queer feminist movement for over a decade. I think I stopped at like over a decade. I haven't been adding up the years since. I'm originally from Tunisia and I've been moved to Montreal about 7 years ago. I've been doing quite a lot of movement work back in Tunisia at the time, particularly again around within feminist and queer movements, and within the MENA region overall as well, the Middle East and North Africa. I've been part of different organizations and different movements as well, including, as I mentioned, the feminist queer movement, also the migrant movement. I've done a lot of work with different organizations there and in the region. And then since I've been in Montreal for the past 7 years, I've been doing quite a lot of work within philanthropy. And I've been really passionate about this. I don't take it as just my work, but more as a passion of mine. I've really put a lot of efforts into my work within the movement and with the movements, working at the grassroots as well. I also do quite a lot of things outside of work, still very much connected to my work as well. I've been recently doing work with some of my friends, people that I have met along the way in these spaces to kind of build more collective care, resting, and healing spaces in order to really recenter ourselves, particularly right now within the current landscape that we're living in. And I also recently started dancing, so that's been one of my passions. Recently, I do mostly Latin dances, and so I've been doing a lot of that, and that's been also one way for me to balance my work and my involvement within the movement and with just like being able to move my body and recenter myself in other spaces. Yeah, so I think like that's kind of a bit of a summary, a very quick summary of who I am and how I've gotten here today. And I'm happy to expand a little bit more also throughout this conversation.
Thank you, Senda. That's so exciting. I just love hearing about your journey from Tunisia to Montreal to the salsa dancing floor. I think it's so, so beautiful the way you kind of narrate the ways that your body has moved through space and the way that your body grounds you, reclaiming movement, I think, as an act of maybe joy, as an act of resistance, an act of grounding. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's just been so great to be in community with you in the world of work. I really loved getting to co-lead. We did a big strategic planning process about a year ago with a BAMIMSA or MENA focus organization based in the US. And so you were really wonderful in terms of, thinking about not only strategies for the organization overall, but also strategies for particularly how they support their grantees, choose their grantees, et cetera. And so I know that grantees are very close to your heart, but I would love for you to speak for yourself on that. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about like kind of your current line of work outside of consulting, kind of what led you to this. I hear you saying like you've been really experienced in the movement space for a long time, but just curious if there was like one particular inspirational pinpoint you could give, just so we can have visibility into what lights you up.
So I feel like I found myself in philanthropy by mistake or by chance. I'm not sure how to kind of frame it. I was initially just really involved in movement spaces, working at the grassroots level, engaging with people within the grassroots level. I've never really pictured myself working in philanthropy. It's never been an aspiration of mine or anything. I just really truly found myself there by pure chance. I was working with an organ. I mean, I was on the advisory board of an organization, and at some point they needed some extra support working within the MENA region portfolio. And so I stepped in just as a support. And then just like from being like a consultant doing a few hours a week to like being a full-time staff. And that's how it just started, really. I just found myself engaging with grantee partners and learning so much about such incredible movements and such incredible work that is being done on the ground, and feeling really inspired of hearing all of these stories and learning from all of these stories, and kind of also finding myself like in the middle of like connecting people together to say, oh, there's this organization or this group that's doing similar work, and I think you could actually learn from each other and benefit from each other's knowledge. And I feel like my role, as I see it right now, and the reason why I really enjoy working in philanthropy, is really being connected in a different way to all of these movements and all of this work, and hoping at least and wanting to contribute in a way to creating these connections, to building a movement that is based on exchange and learning. And a lot of my work within philanthropy has been around learning and exchange and capacity strengthening and creating spaces. Grant making is obviously a big part of it, but I do find myself more engaging in these other spaces that I've had the chance and I had the opportunity to create throughout the different years that I've been working in this field. So yeah, I think that's really my inspiration in doing this work, right? Like just being part of it and witnessing the amazing and incredible strategies that are being built, the incredible work, the impact that we're seeing every day through the work of the grantee partners that we work with. And that's been truly a blessing for all of these years. And the only reason why I am still in philanthropy as well.
Thank you so much, Cinda. That's so beautiful. I just hear when you speak, I just hear your heart for people, like the people, the purpose leaders behind the movements really shining through. And I think that's so beautiful that you're just really deeply inspired by their individual stories and the kind of wider impact that their stories and their journeys even have. And also think it's so cool. I hear you calling yourself indirectly a connector, a bridge builder between purpose leaders, between movements, and using that as a way to surface opportunities for exchange and learning. So I think that's really cool. That's a beautiful role in philanthropy to have. Has that always kind of been, would you say those have always been your core anchors, the core things that have excited you?
I think I discovered it along the way. I did not know how much I actually enjoyed it and how good I was at it actually. And since I started doing it, I've also noticed that this is one of the things that I do well and I should focus more effort into it, right? And when people think about philanthropy, they really think about resourcing movements, sending money, find like the grant making part of it. For me, like philanthropy is such a bigger and wider environment and ecosystem to be within, that I try to focus my efforts more into the other unseen pieces of it, which is again like creating and building and connecting and create like the spaces that are possible to create through these environments, right? So yeah, I think I've discovered this strength and I've been definitely building on that strength and imagining how I could also contribute, because at the end of the day, like I see myself as finding myself again by chance in philanthropy. I feel like it was also somehow a calling for me to be able to be in this space to support movements, for movements to have yet one another ally within these spaces that have historically been white-led, privileged people, people coming from a certain class. And so now that we're seeing a bit of a shift also within these spaces, I'm extremely grateful that we are able to change things and tweak things to benefit the movements better.
Really powerful. I'm also very glad that the movement has you as a strong, incredible ally to sojourn with them. And so what that has me thinking though is about the time of now that we're in, which is a very different time than 10 years ago. I know you said you stopped counting around 10-ish years ago, but around 10 plus years ago, not to say things were not complex, but I think they're complex in a very different way now. And I'm curious, with the difficult times we're facing right now, what are you seeing as someone who is experienced and a leader in philanthropy? What are the key challenges you're seeing kind of in your meta work and the work that you've done co-leading projects with Root to Bloom and other parts of your work lives in the communities that you sojourn with, that you serve in Tunisia, in Montreal, in the wider diaspora? I'm just really curious about what you're seeing and how movements and or organizations in the movements are responding to these challenges.
That is such a big and complex question to be able to answer in such a short time. But I'll try to address some of the main challenges that exist today, particularly, and that, yeah, I've been kind of working very closely to like supporting the groups dealing with, right? So, as you all know, we're living in a current ecosystem that is very much conservative, very much on the political right side in the US and in other countries as well. When we're talking about working in this field with particularly again in philanthropy, we're talking also about money. And so we're talking a lot about Western countries. And we've been seeing that a lot of the Western countries have shifted towards the right. Again, the US is one of them, Sweden is one of them, the UK is one of them, the Netherlands is one of them, Germany is one of them, and many, many others. And these are very big players within the philanthropic sector, right? These are countries that have put millions and billions of dollars into aid in general, humanitarian, like aid towards just gender justice, LGBTQI, etc. So by these countries shifting towards the right, we're seeing a lot of these funding disappear. The US is a great example of how that happened with the recent decisions that the new administration has done of cutting all of the aid basically towards human rights organizations and humanitarian aid as well. So this is one of the impact and the challenges that we're seeing. Basically, organizations no longer have resources to operate. Some more than others. Some have not necessarily historically received funding from the US, and today they are surviving to a certain extent. Some were heavily dependent on US funding. Many of them no longer exist today or are very much struggling to survive. And the thing is that even if some organizations are not directly impacted by this, they are indirectly impacted by it because the general amount of aid has decreased. And so now it's split into even smaller pieces to different, like to a larger number of organizations or groups that are operating. And so this creates a crisis because people no longer have the resources to continue doing their work. One of the other challenges that we're seeing, and this is not just within Western countries, but across the globe, is the rise of anti-gender opposition. And so basically, we're seeing not just governments that are restricting human rights, like gender justice, cutting not just funding, but also cutting and changing laws to restrict movement, to restrict freedom of expression, to restrict freedom of protest, to restrict sexual and reproductive health. So a general sense of closure of the civic space and the rights space in general. And we can here talk about countries truly across the globe. In Africa, we're seeing, for example, North Africa and Tunisia, which was the only open country in the whole region, now is completely closed down. Impossibility of receiving foreign funding, a lot of restrictions, a lot of arrests of human rights defenders that have happened in the past 2 years. Same thing is happening in Western Africa. We're seeing more of this also in the Caucasus, in Georgia, where we've seen protests for over a year now. People protesting the government, complete restrictions of foreign funding, complete restrictions of human rights work in the country. Kyrgyzstan is another example where it's very, very similar to what's happening in Georgia. So these are just few examples of how the whole world is shifting towards the right and how it's becoming extremely difficult to organize in general. And movements are really struggling to respond to this. I'll stop here for these challenges, but I'll share a little bit some of how organizations are being able to respond. So there's been quite a lot of strategizing that is happening, a lot of think tank spaces where people are thinking of how to really proceed to make sure that they're creating spaces. And when we are in a closed environment like this and a very complex sociopolitical landscape, it's extremely important to create spaces for people to get together, for people to talk, because what these governments and what these people are trying to actually create is complete chaos and complete disconnection of the communities. And so bringing communities together is extremely important to survive these periods and to be able to strategize collectively, to go on the streets, to be able to fight back. Other strategies that are currently also being used is learning from different contexts. There have been quite a lot of countries that have gone through these periods, that have come out of these periods. And so there's a lot of exchange happening between countries who are now going under extreme restrictive environments, talking with other movements in other countries where they find some strategies that actually were able to work and actually exchanging this, readapting them to the local context. Other ways of like when it comes to funding, for example, I think there have been quite a lot of conversations around how can we think beyond funding? Because when we're thinking about funding as well, there's an even bigger question that is being asked, right? How have we gotten to a point where we're so heavily dependent on funding that we're unable to do the work that we've historically been able to do with absolutely nothing? And so now I'm seeing a lot of organizations, a lot of groups, a lot of movements are really sitting down and thinking about how can we dismantle this philanthropic system that has made movements so dependent on it and has harmed movements in so many different ways? So how can we go back to the way we used to organize without having to rely on the funding? And it is possible. Anything is possible at the end. And I think like this is also a great opportunity for us to really go deeper into this and understand when can we ask for funding and when can we operate without funding, and what is the impact with funding and what is the impact without funding, and how can we also change the way we approach funding to not have it completely dismantle our structures, completely change the way we operate and change the way we think as well. Because a lot of us eventually end up applying for funding because of the availability of funding, not because of the need that certain movements have. So yeah, these are a bit of what I've been personally hearing about in terms of people responding to some of these challenges for sure.
Thank you, Senda. So much richness here, so much clarity and visibility into what's really happening if we lift up the hood on the landscape to get a sense of what folks are going through who are movement leaders, who are grantee partners. And I just wanted to kind of double click on something. I just wanted to know if you could share a little bit more about if there are new opportunities or shifts you're seeing despite these difficulties. I've heard you say a couple of them, there's an opportunity for community building to be intensified because that's key, because there's an intention to create chaos for communities, and that's how we can combat that. I've also heard you say that there's an opportunity to share strategies across communities and to see what could be supportive, what movements can learn from other movements. So there's a cross-pollination opportunity, but I don't know if there's anything else you could share in terms of other opportunities or shifts that we can hold on to or be inspired by despite the difficulties. And also for you personally, just I'd love to get a sense of what brings you hope, if there is something at this point in time and with all that you're seeing.
I think so. These were some of the examples that I've personally started witnessing, right? Like seeing movement actually reacting to what's happening. I've also seen quite a lot of organizations that have been creating more virtual spaces for people to connect, to share resources. By sharing resources, I mean like content, sharing reports, sharing research, sharing ideas and strategies online where people are able to actually identify, have conversations, etc. And these come as a great substitute to the in-person spaces that have become even more scarce today, right? Especially post-COVID. So I think the conversations around addressing these challenges are also just starting now, and we'll definitely see even more strategies and even more examples of how the communities are going to respond to the current situation. Some of the ways that I've also seen communities respond are through mutual aid, whether by actually collecting funds to support people within their communities or by offering expertise within the community. And so some of them, like who have, for example, worked in like in healing justice environments, so they would come into the community and they would offer some sessions for free for community members who need it. Some of them who have like a good income sometimes will contribute a certain amount monthly into like a bit of like a bank that they would have created to be able to support people who find themselves in like really complicated situations and need additional financial resources. And so I am definitely seeing so much more of these concepts across the globe of people coming together and building these micro mutual aid communities that are actually allowing them to sustain themselves and their communities and to not end up in a situation where they have to rely on funding, because these are also not groups that are structured for most of them. These are groups that are coming together very intuitively to just be there for their communities. Some of them have absolutely no history of even like organizing in the way that we know it, at least. When it comes to, for me personally, what gives me hope right now and what am I doing right now? I think I'm kind of following also the wave of like sitting down and reflecting on what I can do on a personal level to like address this current context. And I've taken time to really reflect and think and analyze what I would personally love to see in this world. And I'm someone who believes in cycles. Like, I think that we are at the end of a cycle currently, a cycle that's completely crumbling and collapsing right now. And I know a lot of people are scared, and I know it's been very rough for a lot of communities, but I also think like with the end of a cycle comes a lot of hope and comes a lot of space for imagination, for envisioning, for building something new. And I think that's where I'm putting my effort right now, right? In being able to create spaces for myself and for my community to think of what do we want out of the next cycle? What do we want to accomplish? How do we want to create a structure for ourselves that actually is balanced, that works for us, that is anti-capitalist, anti-patriarchal, anti-colonial, that we could create together, that we could build together. And so one of the ways for me that that could happen is through the creation of collectives of people coming together, people who are more or less politically aligned, value aligned, who have things to offer and who can come together and sit and talk about what are we seeing today and what do we want to see in the future and how can we make it happen? How can we write it down? How can we build a community that is self-reliant, where we are able to learn from each other, rely on each other, and to truly know each other? Because this cycle that we're currently in is a cycle that has completely broken down relationships, and it's a cycle that, for me at least, is very shallow. I personally don't feel like I know people truly for who they are. It's always surface level of knowing in terms of even learning. Like, we are surrounded by people that sometimes we don't even know that much. We don't, like, people who are unable to rely on us when we need them, when they need us, people that we are unable to rely on properly because we are so caught up in the everyday life that and I'm talking about myself, particularly in the community that I've been having conversations with, like, we are constantly running that we're unable to build deep connections and deep relationships with people. And for me, my vision for the next cycle is that I want to be able to build deeper connections with people, to be able to know people, to be able to make true friendships, and knowing that I have a full community that I can rely on and that can rely on me if ever they need to, without even double thinking if they could actually call me if they are in need. And I think this is the most important part for me right now, is really focusing on that and building connections and making sure that we are creating something, an alternative to how things are happening right now within at least the movement.
Yeah. Mm. No, I'm just thinking about the very ethos and crux of our humanity that you're raising. Do we know each other? Do we know our neighbors? We're in community, but are we in community? So I think that's such a powerful, yeah, that's a powerful act of resistance. It's such an important part of us being able to form these communal bonds, but also just being human. I don't know if it's, I'm not here to fault tech, but I'm like, is it partly tech? You know, what is it about now? I mean, I know it was different when our parents were coming up. I mean, what is it that, I don't know if you feel like you have a sense of why there's this hurdle that we now have to overcome, just even being able to be in real meaningful community. But yeah, just curious what you think about that.
That's a very good question. Maybe I'll share an example like I was struggling with. Um, so I've been having conversations with my therapist in a way that I was telling her, like, since I've left Tunisia, like, my extended family has never really picked up the phone to ask about me. And I was so hurt. And I was telling my therapist, like, I feel so hurt about this. Why do I always have to be the one calling and asking about them, where they never even think, how is Senda doing? Let's check in on her. And she said something very interesting, and that got me really thinking. She said that sometimes we are in a certain community and then we leave that community for one reason or the other. And then for that community, it's not that we no longer exist, but we have made a decision, a conscious decision of leaving that community. And so it's up to us now, the people who left, to check in on that community, because we are no longer part of their everyday, but their everyday still exists. So I don't know if this answers your question necessarily, but it's also part of, like, the way of me trying to think about, like, how how do we navigate being in communities, and what is our responsibilities within communities, and what is the community's responsibility towards individuals, right? And so, yeah, I feel like there are so many questions to ask, for sure, to really understand how we could be in community fully and acknowledge our role and truly be as human beings within the community, as raw human beings, without masking, without protecting. Because sometimes in our way of, like, trying to protect the community, we're also harming it in a way, because we are no longer vulnerable with the community. And vulnerability, I think, for me, is what makes a group of people a community, to be able to truly be our full selves within an environment that we trust fully, knowing very well that if we fall, everybody's got our backs and vice versa. So again, not sure if this answered the question, but these have been some of the things that I've been definitely reflecting on and thinking of how can we get out of this, again, this colonial capitalist patriarchal system that has rebuilt communities in such a shallow way and really recenter what community truly means for, I mean, or what community truly meant, I would say. And maybe engaging with people who still have managed to continue having these communities and relearn from them how to truly be a community once again. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful and important learning I'm taking from this episode, an important reminder. None of our movements could happen without community or communal solidarity. It wasn't individuals, it was communities building a movement. Like that's what a movement is. It's communities coming together to advocate. And so with such a threat to communities, and as you've hinted to, that does seem a bit intentional at this point in this particular moment that we find ourselves in. It's just that much more important. So I really want to appreciate you for lifting that up. I also wanted to ask you one parting question because I already know that there will be listeners who want to support, who want to be an ally to grassroots movements. Do you have any suggestions on how folks can be strong allies to grantee partners, movements, or to communities during these times?
I think listening and getting to know people, again, really recentering that relationship that we build with people and with communities. I think we've gotten to a point in what my partner usually calls the social media era of the 30-minute learnings. We have expectations to learn very fast and to get like these 30 seconds Instagram reels that are supposed to tell us all about a specific subject, right? And I think it's the same expectation that is happening now within our movements. Every learning has to be fast. All of the conversations have to be short. When we're having panels, it's like 30-minute, an hour panel, and we're supposed to address a full-on subject. And in these spaces, we're not really able to fully have an understanding of people and who they are and their thoughts and their values and their politics, right? And sometimes we are also very fast to judge. And I think that is one thing that I'm working on a lot within our communities. It's the woke era and it's the cancel culture era. And so we have a tendency to be very emotional about certain conversations. And I think one of the things that I would very much love for listeners to engage more in is taking their time of engaging with people and accepting the errors and the mistakes that people make, accepting that growth is possible, that people can change, that thoughts change. We were not born with political active thinking or whatever. Like we developed this with time through conversations, through discussions, through conflicts. And conflict is such an important part of our life today that somehow has become such a concept that we are trying very hard to get away from. And so engage in conflict. Conflict is amazing. Conflict allows us to actually learn about people, to learn about ourselves and to think. Conflict is what allows for critical thinking, right? And so I think that's what I want to ask people to engage more in, to engage in conflict, healthy conflict, conflict that allows us to grow together, to build communities together, to learn from each other, and to build these communities, these strong communities. Because who are we if we're not able to have conflict, right? Who are we if we're not able to disagree on something? We're just going to be exactly like the clone of each other. Conflict is what makes us human. So, yeah.
Well, Cinda has dropped the mic, y'all. Such a beautiful, beautiful share. I'm just sitting with that with so much gratitude. Thank you so much for lifting that up. Cinda, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with us. I have personally taken so much from this conversation, and I'm sure others will as well. And just want to appreciate you for giving us some insights into grassroots movements, what they're carrying, what they're navigating, and how we can be good, not even just allies, but accomplices to them. So, folks, today's discussion reminded us that behind every single movement, there are real people. There are real people doing the work, holding the work, reflecting deeply, finding ways to hold on to hope where it feels like maybe there's no hope, building community intentionally, as Senda talked about, resourcing innovatively, which Senda talked about, mutual aid, micro communities, for example, and living the questions bravely and vulnerably at such a time as this. So, if you took something from this episode, I do want to invite you to carry it forward, to support the communities and organizations that you care about, to amplify the voices doing transformative work, and also to remember that change starts with community and that very kind of baseline connection. And think about engaging in that more meaningfully and practicing community in your day-to-day life. So, Cinda, before we end, I want to ask, where can folks follow your journey or stay connected if they would like to do so?
I think folks can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm using my name, Senda Ben Jebara. And yeah, I'm happy to connect with folks there. If people want to reach out, they can just send me a message and I'll be happy to reach back out.
Thank you, folks. Definitely connect with Cinda if any of this resonates with you. And if you'd like to, and to all of our listeners, our subscribers, if this conversation spoke to you, we do invite you to also stay rooted with us at Root to Bloom. You can find us in a few different places on the internet. One is at our website, www.roottobloom.org. You can also follow us on IG if you'd like. Our handle is at We Are Root to Bloom. You can also find us on LinkedIn as well, under our handle Root to Bloom. Okay, folks, until next time, we'll see you soon.